And we are going to be talking about Jesus the discipler. I have a hard time sitting and talking. I'm going to try, but I will probably not stay on the stool very long. Jesus the discipler. What was the model? What was the program? What was the way that Jesus made disciples? Well, it's a very complex, hard to understand system. I don't even know if we have time today to cover the entire system of how Jesus made disciples, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to try to encapsulate today how Jesus made disciples. Are you ready for it? Okay, here it is. Follow me.
Right, that's it.
Okay, just repeat after me. Follow me. No, you didn't repeat after me, you repeated with me, but that's okay. That was good. Y'all are faster than most churches. Y'all don't wait to be told what to say. Follow. As far as I can tell, that's the whole plan. That was the whole system that Jesus had for making disciples. You find this throughout his story. And it involves a couple of things. It involves invitation and challenge. And you find this invitation and this challenge throughout the teaching of Jesus. For instance, in Mark chapter 1, right at the very beginning of Mark's telling of the story, it says, as Jesus walked along beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Seems kind of obvious, but Mark had to add that in. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once, they left their nets and followed him. I have a visual display this morning. The kind of net that they were probably casting into the sea was one not very different from this one. These things haven't changed much in the last couple thousand years. They still use them all over the world today. You see them all the time. It's a cast net. Now this one might be a little bit fancier than they had because it's got some monofilament line holding it together. But it was a real simple kind of deal. It's just a net with some weights on it. And you grab it. And you throw it. And you hope it opens. See, it didn't that time. But if that would have been water down there, maybe it would have opened. But that's all they did. They would just take this net. Open a little bit, not much. And this is what they were doing. It's what they did. Now, they had two types of nets back then. This was just one type of net. This is a cast net. And it says those two guys, these brothers, were out there throwing this net, catching fish. It goes on, it says, when he had gone a little farther, he's walking down the beach, and right down the beach from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat, preparing, it probably should say, repairing their nets. You notice that in my version, James, all these guys are older Italian gentlemen, I don't know, but these are just some pictures I took of net fishermen when I was in Italy. And it says, without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. So you see right there two things, invitation and challenge. Invitation, follow me. Challenge, I will teach you a new way of fishing. I will teach you how to fish for people. Now, I love to fish. I love talking about fishing. I'm so glad Jesus chose fishermen to be his primary disciples because it lets me talk about fishing a lot. But one of the things that I did for a long time is I wrote articles for a little fishing magazine. It wasn't a big deal. It was a small kind of regional magazine. And I would write how-to articles in the magazine. I don't know if any of you have ever done any writing before, but writing how-to is the hardest kind of writing to do. Because you're trying to explain something that is just so much easier to show. You know, and so I would explain things like, you know, how to catch a particular species or how to work a particular type of area or a lure or something like that. And I found it was very difficult to really explain it. It's so much easier to take someone fishing and say, watch what I do, imitate what I do, and then do it yourself, and let's see how you do. You can teach someone how to do something a whole lot quicker that way than you can trying to write it in an article. And this made me think that Jesus could have just sent the book. He didn't have to come to earth. He could have just sent the book and said, read the book, this will show you how to do it. But he understood that get it right, they were going to need to see it done. They were going to need to do it with him and follow him. I was thinking, if Jesus had just sent a book, he could have had chapter titles like How to Handle a Naked Man in a Cemetery. Now, I don't know how you would write that into a book. Feeding a lot of people with a little food, things like that. First steps to walking on water. I mean, he could have chapters like that. But instead, he showed them. Now, this is critical, because my Gideon buddy over here is saying, yeah, but the book's important. The book is important. In fact, his followers wrote down these things that they followed him doing. And John, wrote down these things. And at the end of John's book, he said, if I was to write down everything I saw Jesus do, all the books in the world wouldn't hold it. So even the books, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, that tell the story of Jesus, only tell some of the story, the best they could do in writing it down. It was the part we needed to have. God inspired it in such a way that this is what we needed to have. But it started with Jesus saying, follow me. And there are so many tremendous testimonies of people, in motel rooms, in schools, in places like that, who just picked up that book, and in that book that it contains the words of life, found Jesus. But even after that, they need to be discipled. And that's what we're talking about today, is the discipleship part, the follow me part. So it starts, like I said, with invitation. Some other examples of that. As Jesus went on from there, this is Matthew 9:9. It's not going to be on the screen, don't worry. So Jesus went on from there. He saw a man named Matthew sitting on the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. Now Matthew, he had a toll booth. Now, it was a little bit different from our toll booths because it was a tax toll booth. They would get taxed when people are coming into a town. So if you're coming in to visit a town, the Roman government would ask a tax of you, and Matthew was sitting there. He's collecting taxes. So he had his money box in front of him, and he's collecting those taxes. And Jesus comes up to him. It would be like if you pulled up to the toll booth, looked at the person at the toll booth, and said, hey, follow me. That's exactly what Jesus did. Follow me. I wonder if Jesus got away with not paying his toll. I never thought about that. That thought just came into my mind right then. I usually shouldn't say those thoughts out loud when they come in my mind. In another place, John chapter 10, verse 27, and we do have this slide, Jesus says, my sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. Now, how do the sheep know his voice? How do the sheep know their sheep? Because the way they did it back then, they would put 4 or 5 shepherds get together, put their whole flocks together, and they'd take them out grazing. And then at the end of the day, they'd call their sheep to them. How does the sheep know the voice of their shepherd? Because they've listened to it every day. They know that voice because they've heard that voice every day. So how do we listen? We do it every day. How do we follow? We follow every day. That's what Jesus is saying here. My sheep know my voice. They hear it, and they follow me. Now this means more. We were talking about Facebook a little while ago. It means more than follow him on Facebook. Jesus doesn't have a Facebook page. It means more than follow my blog. It means physically come with me. I want you to walk around where I walk around. I want you to sleep where I sleep, eat what I eat, and see what I do. That's what he was telling those followers back at the beginning. He knew he had a limited time on earth. He knew he wasn't going to be here forever. And he knew that in that limited time, he had to start a movement that would literally change the world. And so the way he chose to do that was through just saying, follow me. Follow me. See what happens. Follow me. Watch what I do. Now, people responded to this invitation in a lot of different ways. There was always a crowd. There was always the big crowd. You remember in Jesus' story, there are times when he fed 5,000 people at one time or 4,000 people at one time. There was a crowd that followed Jesus. They were, a lot of them were probably just curious. A lot of them were just there to see what's going on. Their level of commitment may not have been very high, but at least they were starting the process of following him. Then there was something I would call like a congregation. There was at least 70, maybe 120. We've heard those two figures in the scripture. 70 were sent out, 120 in other places it mentions them. So there was a group of people that were more committed, that were following Jesus, not just when he comes to their town, but following him everywhere he went. Then there was that group of committed folks. There was 12 guys that followed Jesus and literally slept where he slept, ate what he ate, lived where he lived. And Jesus would do a little bit more with them. After he would do a miracle or do something, then he would get them aside and he'd say, "What did you see? What did you sense there? What was going on?" So the follow me had to do with a dialogue too. I'm going to, as we go along, as you learn, I'm going to be instructing you. And then even within that group of 12, he had a group of 3, the core leadership team that he spent more time with. There were stories where it said he took these 3 guys, along with him and went somewhere that the rest of them didn't go. That was, in fact, it was 3 of the 4 guys he met on that day fishing, James and John and Peter. They were the ones he knew were going to be significant leaders in this movement. So he gave them even more instruction. But he always was inviting. He was always putting out the invitation, "Hey, follow me." Then there was the challenge. The challenge usually comes with the invitation. Quite often when God gives us a challenge, we have something in our hand. For Peter, it was one of these. This was Peter's safety blanket. It's what he knew. In fact, when things got rough, Peter went fishing, and that was his comfort level. That's what he knew. He knew fishing. In fact, we're going to see a story in a little bit where Peter went fishing right at the end before Jesus went back into heaven. This is what Peter had in his hand. So the challenge was, Peter, are you willing to let loose of this a little bit and follow me? See, for Matthew, it was that box of money. It was his job. It was his vocation, the money. Remember the story of Moses? For Moses, what was it? What did he have in his hand? God asked him, "What do you got in your hand?" He said, "A stick, a staff." Often God will use that thing in your hand for his glory. In Moses' case, he used the staff to help convince Pharaoh of what was going on. But sometimes God is asking us to give up what's in our hand. He's asking us to let loose of what's in our hand. Whenever we're invited by God to respond with yes, there's always a no that goes with it. Yes to this, no to this. Yes to following him, no to following the world. Yes to becoming more involved in the life of the kingdom and the church. No to spending more time doing other things. That's the challenge. Jesus put it very bluntly in Matthew 16:24. He said, "Whoever wants to be my disciples must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Has it ever occurred to you that they may not even have understood what he was saying that day? This was before the cross. This is before Jesus died on a cross. And they would come to learn what this meant. But on this day he said, if you want to really be my follower, there's a challenge that comes with it. There's a deeper level where you deny who you are, take up your cross, which was to say, be willing to give up your life and follow me. I hear people today sometimes saying, "Oh, that's just my cross to bear." And they're talking about because they've got arthritis. That's not what Jesus was talking about, What he was saying is you got to be willing to put it all on the line. I'm going to put it all on the line. If you're following me, you're going to see me put it all on the line. Are you willing to put it all on the line? Sometimes it is what's in the person's hand that he asks for. There was a time he was talking to this rich young ruler. This guy was a good religious person. He was wealthy. He came to Jesus. "What do I need to do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Hey, follow the stuff you've been taught in your religion, the 10 Commandments and all that." And that guy said, yeah, I've done all that. Jesus looks at him and says, "If you want to be perfect," now let me stop there. Perfect doesn't mean perfect like we mean perfect. It means whole, complete. If you want to be completely into this thing, sell your possessions and give them to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. Then come follow me. Jesus doesn't ask all of us to sell all of our possessions and give to the poor. But that's the thing that was standing in this guy's way. His possessions, his money bag, was the thing that was standing between him and God. That's the thing he needed to give up. So the challenge for us is, what's in your hand? What's in your hand? Is it a tool like Moses' staff that can be used for God? Or is it baggage like the net that needed to be let go? So we have an invitation. We have a challenge. But there's another thing. There's another part of this movement of discipleship that Jesus gives us. And this is the good part. It's the promise. Quite often when Jesus gives the invitation and when he makes the challenge, he follows it up with the promise. Talking to the 12 apostles, he said this, "Truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne," in other words, at the end of time, "you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." He was saying to his disciples, if you truly follow me to the end, now one of them didn't, we know that, but if you fully follow me to the end, I promise you leadership, capacity, authority in the kingdom of heaven. That's huge. That's what he promised them. He makes other promises. John 8:12, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Do you want to never walk in darkness? Would you like to get to the place where it's never dark, and I don't mean, physically dark, but darkness around you? A lot of people are walking around in darkness. Jesus promises, if you really follow me, my light will illuminate and there won't be any darkness. That's a great promise. Another place in John 12:26, it says, "Whoever serves me must follow me," invitation, challenge, "and where I am, my servant also will be." And listen to this, "My Father will honor the one who serves me." God will honor you. I never noticed that part of that verse. We're in the first part, where my servant's down, that's where I'll be. He says, my Father will honor you. A lot of people are afraid of God. They fear, when I get to heaven, I'm going to be in for it. Because I know I've screwed up. I've done a lot of stupid things in life. I've messed up. But what he's saying here is if you serve him and you follow him, he will honor you. He won't judge you. He will honor you. So here we're left with these three things. We have an invitation, we have a challenge, and we have a promise. For the invitation, what is Jesus inviting you to today? Now, I'm used to being in a lot of traditional Baptist churches, and they always end the service with what they call an invitation. So after the sermon, they'll play a song, and during that, they'll say, "This is the invitation, and here's the ways you can respond to the invitation." And they always have the same three things. You can accept Jesus as your Lord today, and that is the most important thing we can do in following him. Or they say, you can join this church today, or you can rededicate your life to him, as if these are the only three things Jesus ever invites us to. See, some people think once I have started following him, I can check that off my bucket list and I don't have to worry about it anymore. But the reality about this whole follow thing is he is constantly asking us to follow him in different ways. It's not just the big follow me. It's what are you going to do this week to follow me? Because see, we're supposed to be going where he's going. Following him means going where he's going. Where is he already at work in the community? Are we going to follow him out there into that place? Or where is he at work in my workplace, at my school? Where is he already at work? Where is he inviting me to go, hey, I'm already here. Just come on. Follow me into this place. See, our invitation is changing all the time. It's not something that just happens at the end of a worship service, and it's not just one of a couple little things. Our invitation is every day waking up and saying, okay, Jesus, where are you going today? I'd like to follow you. There's all right if I come along. Can I tag along with you today? That's the invitation. It's constantly changing, constantly moving. So what's the challenge that Jesus is putting in front of you today? Is there something in your hand that you need to give up, or at least give to him? You know, a lot of us, y'all are pretty good right now. A lot of us always have one of these in our hands. You got a table, you can put it in front. Y'all can be discreet. It's on in front of you on the table, right? You know, a lot of people today, this never leaves their hand. It's there all the time, you know. I was reading the definition of the different generations. You know, my generation see this as a tool that you use occasionally, you know. And then the next generation younger than me, you know, see it as an everyday thing. The youngest generation, who are teenagers and 20-somethings now, this is a part of their body. It doesn't leave, you know. It's not just a tool. It is literally, you know, an extension of their hand. This represents a lot. In fact, it represents my calendar. I don't know about you, my calendar's on here. It's synced to all my other, you know, stuff. But right here is a part of my life. Am I willing to give this up? To say my calendar belongs to Him instead of me setting the agenda for the week? Maybe He sets the agenda for the week. Maybe I trust Him to decide what I'm going to do this week instead of me being so structured, you know, and organized like I try to be. You know, for some people, what they're holding on too tight, maybe not physically, but symbolically, is their wallet. You know, this represents my resources, my money, you know, my income. Am I holding it like this, or am I holding it like this? Like I say, He doesn't call on all of us to sell everything we own and give it to Him, but He calls on all of us to be willing to hold it like this, not like this. I don't know what's in your hand. Is it the tool of the trade that you work in? Whatever that trade is. Have you given that to Him? See, we like to compartmentalize our lives and keep part of it as our secular life, our work, our job, our thing. You know, and then we have our spiritual life over here. And we give Him all the spiritual stuff, and He's asking for this stuff. So that's the challenge. What is He asking you to give up today? And then there's the promise. What do you need from Jesus? You know, He promises us a lot. I think all of us need to hear the words that He said in one of His parables when He said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Some of you are just tired. You've been serving Jesus for a long time, and it gets tiring. Some of you get here early every Sunday to make sure the coffee's made. Make sure the stage is set. Make sure that the goofy speaker who brought in slides that don't match your system, that you can get those slides working on your system. You know, some of you do that week in and week out, and you're just tired. Maybe the promise for you is a little rest, you know. Maybe it's a little refreshing from God. He wants us to enjoy serving Him. He wants us to have fun doing it. Not that it's some thing we have to do, some obligation, some task. But it's a joy of just enjoying being with Him. Right at the end of the story, Peter, who was, you know, one of the first ones He invited to follow Him, Peter wasn't the brightest guy. He ended up being the one who led the church. But Jesus saw something in him that nobody else would have seen. But Jesus, you know, He died. They put Him in the ground. He rose again. And He had already met with them after that. And He says, "You guys just hang around, you know, for now." So Peter goes, he looked at the rest of the guys and goes, "I'm going fishing." I mean, he didn't know what else to do. He went back to his safety zone. He said, "You know, I don't know what Jesus wants us to do now. I don't know about you guys. I'm going fishing." So there's this story where they're all back around the Sea of Galilee, where most of them had grown up, and Peter's out there and he's fishing, and you know, crazy things happen. Jesus says things like, "Why don't you put the nets on the other side of the boat?" And they're going, "You know, if you know anything about fishing, Jesus, that doesn't matter." You know, but there's this part of this story that you know, Peter's come back up on the beach and they've had breakfast. Jesus fed them breakfast, which I thought was just fascinating. Here He is, the risen Son of God, and He's fixing, you know, I was going to say bacon and eggs, but they didn't eat bacon. You know. bacon and pita bread, eggs and pita bread or whatever, And he's having this conversation with Peter. And then, see, Peter is screwed up bad. You remember the story when Jesus was at his worst point, when he'd been arrested and he was being tried. Peter, 3 times denied that he even knew Jesus. And Jesus had a little repair work to do with Peter. So he very tenderly says, Peter, you need to feed my sheep. In other words, I'm calling on you to be a leader. I'm calling you to be and Jesus, leader meant servant. I'm calling you to serve the flock. And after these 3 times of doing that, Peter's getting a little frustrated. Yeah. I will feed the sheep. Okay, I'll take care of the flock. I'll do what you want me to do. And then Jesus says, truly, very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself. You went wherever you wanted to go. But when you get old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And it says in parentheses, Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Peter would take up his cross. He would follow Jesus. He would die for the cause. Then Jesus said, follow me. As if Peter hasn't heard this 1,000 times. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. Now, whenever in the book of John you read something like the disciple Jesus loved, John's talking about himself. He was just humble. He wasn't trying to point to himself. So John's back here. So Peter turns and John is following them. And it says in parentheses, this was the one who had leaned back against Jesus on the supper and had said, Lord, who is going to betray you? So we would know it was John. When Peter saw him, this is an interesting little, very human moment. He asked, well, Lord, what about him? You're asking me to follow you, and you're telling me I'm going to die. What about that guy? The one you love, Your favorite, what about him? And then Jesus says, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? In other words, I can do whatever I want with that guy. And then he just looks at him again and says, just follow me. And that's the whole story. Right after that, the story ends. Just follow me. That's the whole plan. There is nothing else. Jesus never stopped being a discipler. And he never stops inviting us to follow him. Let's pray. Lord, some of us have followed you and kind of in fits and starts. We'll follow you pretty well for a while, then we'll kind of slack off, or we'll head in a different direction. We'll do like Peter, we'll screw up and you've got to fix things. But you're always inviting, you're always asking, you're always saying, come follow me. It's going to be challenging, but I promise you if you do, good things are going to happen. Lord, I just pray today that everyone here is saying yes to that invitation. Whatever that looks like today, this week, that we're saying yes. Lord, I pray that those who are here who need the promise today to hear the good words, that they're hearing it from you. Well done, you're doing a good job. You are a good and a faithful servant. You're part of my Father's business now. Lord, teach each one of us to imitate you to the point where we can say to someone else, hey, follow me because I'm following Jesus. Look what I do. Follow what I do because I'm following him. That's a scary place for us because we don't want ourselves to be the example, and yet that's the system you set up. So help us not to just be followers of you, but be people who are drawing followers to you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.